This was a long time ago, late 90s. When I was 19, I moved from Oregon to Florida to be with my boyfriend at the time. I was thinking white sand beaches and Mickey Mouse, but instead I got the swamp, bugs, and dirt roads. It was a huge shock to the system. We lived in this dinky little town called Hawthorne, just outside of Gainesville. Very small. One stoplight and 4 stores. Dollar General, Steve's Market, Eckerd's Pharmacy, and Sonny's Barbecue. Anyway, I got a job at the now defunct Eckerd's in the middle of town. It was next to the grocery store, so pretty much everybody stopped by. After about 3 months or so of working there, I walked in to start my shift one day, when the manager pulled me into his office. Laid out on his desk was about 30 to 40 unopened letters, all addressed by hand. To me. "Do you know this person?" my manager asked. "No." "Well, read one." I picked the cheerful yellow one. Inside were 2 handwritten letters and a magazine cutout of a woman with long blonde hair, just like me. As the Eckerd manager watched on, I read the letter. I skipped around a lot of confusion, desperately trying to find out why I'm in this room. From what I read, it was mostly someone imagining what spending time with me would be like. A lot of it was sexual in nature. There were descriptions and comments about my hair, washing it, smelling it, and something about the moonlight. A few sentences were highlighted, and others were underlined. My first thought was, am I getting fired? "Do you know this David Elrod?" I said yes, I think so. The tall, lanky guy with thick glasses and frizzy dark blonde hair. The regular who comes in a couple times a week to pick up Diet Coke and medication for his mom. Late 20s, and obviously socially or mentally challenged. On rare occasions, he would make small talk as I rang up his soda. Once or twice, he would linger at my register or stare at me, but I figured he was just trying to adjust his eyes or had poor social cues. Harmless compared to some of the other people I had met in Florida, so I didn't pay him any mind. Until that day in Eckerd's office. I knew he wrote the letters because of a strange encounter 2 weeks earlier. While working, he had come up behind me and caressed my hair. I had to remove it from his hands, and he apologized. Weird, but it was no harm really, so I went back to work. After telling my manager this, he informed me that the customer was going to be banned from the store, and I was being sent home while they worked out the details. What details? Confused, I walked out of the store and drove home. This was all so strange. 2 hours after I got home from my non-shift at work, there was a knock on my door. I look out the window and see what resembles a SWAT team. What the fuck? I saw men in tactical gear with large weapons, 2 men dressed in suits, and several uniformed cops. In what seemed like slow motion at the time, I opened the door. A female officer holds up a few oddly familiar letters. "Can we come in and talk to you about these?" Realizing everyone in town has read them, I wanted to pass the fuck out. I didn't even know the guy. We have a seat on my couch and she begins to speak. Out of the corner of my eye, I see my boyfriend shooting me dirty looks from the bedroom. The female officer mentions getting the letters from Eckerd's and attempting to issue a trespassing notice. They wanted to speak to him directly, she says, because her whole department was aware of David. The officers confronted him at his residence and attempted to evoke the trespassing notice from Eckerd's store. Apparently, he wasn't happy about this. He insisted for over 45 minutes how this was all a big mistake, and I wanted to talk to him. He was so combative and persistent, they decided to pursue stalking charges. She continues, "You need to be aware that David killed and partially dismembered his mother when he was 12 years old. He was released from a juvenile psychiatric facility less than 4 years ago. "We found disturbing materials at his home," she continued. "We believe he's been stalking you." My mind started to wander. "Diet Coke. It's my mom's favorite drink." David was arrested the next day for stalking after he was found in the Eckerd's parking lot. But the last official word was that he went back to the psychiatric hospital, at least temporarily. I didn't have the chance to read the letters in full before they were entered in some sort of vault of evidence, nor did they explain what they found at his house, so I never had the complete picture of what was happening. My boyfriend was a huge dick about the whole thing, so I moved back to Oregon a week later. Besides, who wants to hang around when Norman Bates is fixated on you? My boyfriend, who I live with, works as a teacher in a town about 15 minutes away by train. He gets home more or less at the same time every day, give or take about an hour or so. I, on the other hand, work from home. In late January of this year, we'd gotten into a pretty big fight about something stupid. I can't even remember what it was about now, but it was one of those fights where we didn't speak to each other, text, call, or anything the next whole day. So this afternoon, I was lying in bed getting work done. It was a Tuesday, and I was pretty sure his last class finished at 1 p.m. on Tuesdays, meaning he'd surely be home at 2:30. But at around 1 p.m., I heard the front door open and shut. I thought, I guess he's home about an hour early today. It was normal for him to skip his last class every once in a while, so I didn't think too heavily on it. In fact, I was mostly mentally preparing for the awkward post-fight "hey, how's it going" conversation. I continued to lie in bed and do my work and wait for him to come in and change his clothes. The bedroom door was closed, and I had earplugs sort of half in, as I usually do when I'm working, but I could hear the heavy footsteps of him walking around the apartment, like he always does. If we hadn't been mid-fight and I wasn't so preoccupied with the awkwardness of it all, I might have noticed it was strange how slow the footsteps were, or how long he spent walking around the living room. But I was caught up in the dramatics of the fight and didn't think about it. I was just lying there, waiting for him to finally come in. Finally, the bedroom door slowly opened just a few inches. I turned my head towards the door and prepared to give him a sort of awkward, "we'd been fighting for 24 hours, huh?" kind of smile. But the door didn't open more than a few inches. I looked and saw that it was a woman's hand with red nail polish on the doorknob. Whoever was there slowly closed the door just like they had opened it, without entering the room. I jumped out of bed, ripped out my earplugs, and sort of froze there for a few seconds while thinking rapidly. My first thought, that was not my boyfriend. Then I thought that it could have been his mom, or maybe his sister, or the landlady. For some reason, I concluded that it was surely his mom or sister, so I opened the bedroom door and walked into the living room. There wasn't anyone there, but the room smelled heavily of woman's perfume. Then I came to my senses and realized his mom and sister don't have keys, and they've never come over before. The landlady has never entered without permission, so this was a stranger. I ran back into the bedroom and shut the door, now shaking heavily. There's a balcony connected to the bedroom, so despite the cold January rain, I stood on the balcony and called my boyfriend. He picked up, and I asked him if his mom or sister might have come over unannounced. He told me no, and not to move, that he was calling the police. The police were there in just a few minutes, and searched the whole apartment. Of course, nobody was there by this point. It was weird, though. Nothing was missing from the apartment, despite us keeping a jar full of money right in the entrance. Nothing was even touched. In fact, it seemed like the intruder came straight to the bedroom, saw my legs on the bed, panicked, and left. Plus, you can't open that big wooden door in the front without a key. For a few days, my boyfriend and I were convinced it was just the landlady being nosy. I began to feel a little better. Nevertheless, we demanded that the landlady change our locks. When she came to change them with her husband, she made a discovery. There was a square area by the keyhole that had been scratched away with something. The landlady said surely someone had used tools to break into our apartment. And then a day or two later, my boyfriend told me, "I have to tell you something, but don't freak out." He told me that the orange kitchen scissors were missing. Obviously, I freaked out. I tore the apartment apart, looking for those scissors. It's been 6 months and they're still gone. So the whole thing is just creepy and weird. A stranger breaks into a nice apartment but doesn't take anything valuable. Takes scissors from the kitchen, goes straight to the bedroom, and then immediately leaves. I never got to meet the person who opened the door that day, and I hope I never do. Hello everyone, long-time lurker, first-time poster. So I'm a 23-year-old Italian male, living in a not-so-small town in southern Italy. Now, it's not the most secure town in the world. In fact, we have a long history of micro-criminality connected to local mafia. But if you're smart, you can keep yourself out of our trouble. I need to explain my daily commute in context first, to make things better to understand. I basically live in the old part of town, as here it's very common for every town to be built around its antique part, and after a 1980 earthquake destroyed a good part of it, it's very affordable to live there. Some parts are beautiful and well kept, but others not so much. So you find good families and great folks sharing spaces with the more pesky types. Doesn't help that the town's castle has been converted into a prison, but luckily only for minor offenders. Now, the encounter itself happened just this January. I came back from uni. It's just a 20-minute drive in the car. But with shitty public transport, it can take up to 1 or 1.5 hours to get home. And as I like to study in the library till it closes at 6:30, I usually come back home at 8 p.m. or later. I get greeted by my dog, Maya, a beautiful sweetheart and innocent 1-year-old lab, and I take her for a walk around this part of the town and the castle, since it's her favorite spot to meet other street dogs. She was taking longer than usual to do her business, and I was freezing since I was wearing lighter than I should. Plus, it was snowing, which is super rare here. It was the first time Maya had seen snow, so she was excited too. For that, I decided to walk back home and grab a jacket to better take the light of the occasion. And on my walk home to cut shorter, I have to pass this abandoned building under construction. It's pretty shitty, had just the pillars and floors done, but a lot of kids used it to play and climb around. Now, as I walk there, I see this guy standing there, his back facing me, still like a rock, and with his head facing up to the first floor. He had a dirty beanie hat and a heavy winter jacket and a tracker suit too wide for his build. And there he was, still. At first I froze in spot too, but it wasn't an extraordinary encounter, since there are a lot of weird people around. I decided to pass on, but the first red alert went off when I watched Maya. She had her back fur raised and was looking at this guy dead. She never did this. As we walked to him, she keeps this behavior, and as we were walking there, she emits a low-pitched growl that makes the man turn around. I had never ever seen his face around here, and if you aren't local, you can't really end up there if you don't want to. His face was creepy. Typical greasy hair and undone 3-day beard. He extended his hand to Maya. "Hey, doggy, how cute are you?" Stupidly, that calmed me down a bit. Maybe he was just a mentally ill person walking around. I know some of them around, and they all pretty much looked like him. There's a dormitory for mentally ill people whose family cannot or don't want to take care of them near here. But when he was trying to pet my dog, I hear something moving on the first floor's concrete. I thought it must have been a cat, but Maya would already be jumping around trying to catch it. So I looked up, and I see this little girl, around 10 years old. She had only fear in her eyes, wide open, really desperate, and I'm not exaggerating at all. She had a familiar face, though. It must have been one of the kids that play around this building. She must have seen me walking my dog around, because as soon as she recognized me, she caught my eyes and tried to whisper help with her lips. After this, I turned my head around, and the creep is watching me now. I would like to say he had the usual creepy smile, but he didn't. He had a very serious face now, looking dead in my eyes. I didn't know what to do. I'm a 1.9 meter tall guy, and kind of imposing, but I never fought anyone before, and I'm usually really peaceful. In a fraction of a second, this guy looks up again and says, "Come on, sweetie. We need to get home. The food will get cold." Yeah, sure. Totally believable. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I ask him. "I'm her uncle. I need to get her home to eat," he says with the most serious look. I was thinking what answer to use as an excuse to bring her down and get her to safety, and being the sarcastic bitchy type in this situation, I say, "That's strange because I'm her uncle. This doesn't add up." At this point, the little girl has the brilliance to lean off and say, "Hey uncle, can you get me home? Mommy will be worried." Now this guy didn't seem to be threatening at the moment, just creepy, so I go under the building to take the little girl, and as I prepare to grab her, Maya first growls at him, then barks. She usually has a really feminine, high-pitched bark, but with this guy it was really low-pitched and scared even me. To that point, I turn around and see this guy with a hand behind his back reaching for something. Oh shit, I think. I can't fight for shit hand on hand, and if this guy has a knife, this would end up badly. He stops his reaching motion, as the bark is now continuous, and in the heat of the moment, the little girl leaned off and I grabbed her with one arm, the other keeping Maya at bay as a deterrent, and while she was descending, I asked if she had a phone. She said that she didn't, and you could hear she was on the brink of crying. As soon as she touched the ground, I unlocked my phone and gave it to her. She took the phone and immediately legged it. I should have been glad to it, but my immediately thought was, if she did this to steal my phone, I'll be deadly pissed. After all, it wouldn't have been unusual, but I basically asked her to take it. Anyways, the girl is gone. I turn around and this dude has a fucking knife out. Not a pocket knife though, one of those big-ass kitchen knives you use to cut bakery bread. And me being so careless in the kitchen, I know how sharp those things could be. I decide to run away too, but Maya decided that she wanted to stand there barking at him, and I couldn't manage to pull her away. She's almost 30 kilograms, but that was a grip too strong even for her. So we were stalling, and this guy starts swinging the fucking knife in the air. I want to run, but if I leave my dog, I know she could end up hurt really bad, and even if I managed to pull her, he could run after us. And there we were, him swinging the knife with empty eyes, my dog barking, and me shitting myself, not knowing what to do. To make matters worse, my hands were freezing cold from not wearing gloves. And the grip leash was starting to hurt. The thing that still surprised me was the fact that I was absolutely sure people on the block could hear the mess, but no one, not a single one, decided to take a look. Anyways, after what seemed like a long time but was probably less than 2 minutes, I hear heavy footsteps from the street I came, and from there a lot of people show up. Probably her dad and some of her relatives and friends with baseball bats. This is not going to end well, I thought. As soon as the creep saw those men, he threw the knife in my direction and started to run to me, trying to go in the street to my direction. I didn't even try to block him because I was still frozen by the knife, but Maya bit his leg, ripped a piece off the tracksuit. But the dude didn't even care and ran for his life, with some of the girl's supposed relatives behind him. He eventually managed to get away, but the girl's father came to me. I thought to thank me, but instead he screamed, "Who the fuck was that guy?" waving the bat around. I looked at the girl, telling him to calm down, but he only got more pissed until the girl ran up to him, telling him that I helped her. She gave my phone back, and after that he calmed down. "Sorry," he told me. "Thanks for helping my girl." He offered me to grab some coffee at his house. I politely refused and went home, deciding it was already too much shit to be put up against for the night. I slept it off. The next morning, police ringed at my bell to take my statement. The guy had managed to run off, and they showed me a book with all the signaled photo IDs and stuff, but nothing came of it. Probably wasn't even from nearby. You could tell from his dialect accent, and that was the end of it. I surely didn't do the best I could, but I'm still glad I could help that little girl. I don't know where she would be if me or someone else didn't show up. This happened 4 years ago. I was 14, and my younger cousin was 9. I took them to the park with my middle school boyfriend, who was 15. There were 2 parks in my neighborhood, one directly behind my house, and the other was behind and down the street. We ended up going to the one that was behind and down the street, which was at the end of a cul-de-sac. Not super far from home, but far enough that we couldn't see the entrance to our street. Now, this park had a wall on the left side, and the main street directly in the back. There was another street to the right behind the field. When you first reach the park, there's a few benches, a basketball court ahead, horseshoe poles, and a big nice field. We were just hanging out and snacking on some food we brought along, but then, out of nowhere, there's a man on a bike watching us from around the corner near the main street. We thought that maybe he was just stopping for some shade or seeing if the park was crowded. I called my cousin over and had her get closer to us just to be safe, and asked her if she wanted to go home. She didn't, but I got her to sit down and eat, so that she wouldn't see what was going on anyways. After a few minutes, he left. Woohoo, what relief, right? Well, after about 5 more, he came back, except he got closer. He rode from the sidewalk of the main street to the basketball court, still watching us. Alright, at this point I'm even more uncomfortable. He starts circling the benches we were gathered at. At this point he was close enough to the point where I could see that he was obviously some kind of junkie. He had long, greasy, nappy hair, scruffy facial hair. He was dirty with scars all over, and reeked of who knows what. He was also dressed like a 5-year-old picked up an outfit from a trash can. He made my stomach churn, and I got some weird vibes from him. I noticed a white band over his wrist, the kind you get when you're admitted into a hospital. In my head, this guy had either just left a health facility, or he went a while ago and just never took it off. I'm pretty sure I was the first one. I told my cousin that we had to go home right now. We slowly started gathering our things, but then the man started talking to us. He told us that he was Jesus reborn, and that I looked like the kind of girl that would know about God. He then went on and on about ending the world, and how his son was a rock star and made more hits than the Beatles and Elvis combined. He was pretty crazy. He started asking my cousin about her Hello Kitty shirt and if she liked it. We started leaving at this point because why would you start a conversation with young kids alone at a park unless you had bad intentions? We thought he'd go away if we ignored him. He starts screaming at us and calling for the Hello Kitty girl as he follows us on his bike. At some points he'd ride past, turn around and repeat. Luckily the gods were with us that day because there was a man working on his car with his garage open. I wasn't sure what to do, but my boyfriend wrapped his arms around me and my cousin and guided us towards my neighbor. "Hey, how are you? Long time no see," my boyfriend said. At first I didn't understand, but I played along, and so did the garage man. We got up close and entered his garage, and we told him that this cracked up Jesus man had been following us and being an all-around creeper. And the garage man scared him off. He introduced himself as Dante, and told us that he had kids of his own that go to the parks alone all the time, and that he'd have to keep an eye on the kids more often. He ended up taking us home once we knew Jesus Man was out of sight. We never ended up going to the park again unless we were with an adult. I'm so thankful for Dante and my smart-thinking middle school boyfriend. If it weren't for either of them, my cousin and I could have been caught up in an unfortunate situation. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, as well as perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have a personal story that you'd like to submit, or you'd like to just send me a message, links to all of my social media will be in the description for the video below. This includes my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the theme of the story is, if it has any, the name of the story, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious at all about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description below, in the order which it appears. I also have links to the artists and list the tracks by name, just in case you want to find more of their work. Last but not least, if you have any criticism, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always about my hair, washing it, smelling it, and something about the moonlight. A few sentences were highlighted, and others were underlined. My first thought was, am I getting fired? Do you know this David Elrod? I said yes, I think so. The tall, lanky guy with thick glasses and frizzy dark blonde hair. The regular who comes in a couple times a week to pick up Diet Coke and medication for his mom. Late 20s, and obviously socially or mentally challenged. On rare occasions, he would make small talk as I rang up his soda. Once or twice, he would linger at my register or stare at me, but I figured he was just trying to adjust his eyes or had poor social cues. Harmless compared to some of the other people I had met in Florida, so I didn't pay him any mind. Until that day, in Eckerd's office, a female officer holds up a few oddly familiar letters. Can we come in and talk to you about these? Realizing everyone in town has read them, I wanted to pass the fuck out. I didn't even know the guy. We have a seat on my couch and she begins to speak. Out of the corner of my eye, I see my boyfriend shooting me dirty looks from the bedroom. The female officer mentions getting the letters from Eckerd's and attempting to issue a trespassing notice. They wanted to speak to him directly, she says, because her whole department was aware of David. The officers confronted him at his residence and attempted to evoke the trespassing notice from Eckerd's store. Apparently, he wasn't happy about this. He insisted for over 45 minutes how this was all a big mistake, and I wanted to talk to him. He was so combative and persistent, they decided to pursue stalking charges. She continues, I knew he wrote the letters because of a strange encounter 2 weeks earlier. While working, he had come up behind me and caressed my hair. I had to remove it from his hands, and he apologized. Weird, but it was no harm really, so I went back to work. After telling my manager this, he informed me that the customer was going to be banned from the store, and I was being sent home while they worked out the details. What details? Confused, I walked out of the store and drove home. This was all so strange. 2 hours after I got home from my non-shift at work, there was a knock on my door. I look out the window and see what resembles a SWAT team. What the fuck? I saw men in tactical gear with large weapons, 2 men dressed in suits, and several uniformed cops. In what seemed like slow motion at the time, I opened the door. Next to the grocery store, so pretty much everybody stopped by. After about 3 months or so of working there, I walked in to start my shift one day, when the manager pulled me into his office. Laid out on his desk was about 30 to 40 unopened letters, all addressed by hand. To me. "Do you know this person?" my manager asked. "No." "Well, read one." I picked the cheerful yellow one. Inside were 2 handwritten letters and a magazine cutout of a woman with long blonde hair, just like me. As the Eckerd manager watched on, I read the letter. I skipped around a lot of confusion, desperately trying to find out why I'm in this room. From what I read, it was mostly someone imagining what spending time with me would be like. A lot of it was sexual in nature. There were descriptions and comments. This was a long time ago, late 90s. When I was 19, I moved from Oregon to Florida to be with my boyfriend at the time. I was thinking white sand beaches and Mickey Mouse, but instead I got the swamp, bugs, and dirt roads. It was a huge shock to the system. We lived in this dinky little town called Hawthorne, just outside of Gainesville. Very small. 1 stoplight and 4 stores. Dollar General, Steve's Market, Eckerd's Pharmacy, and Sonny's Barbecue. Anyway, I got a job at the now defunct Eckerd's in the middle of town. It was